Hi, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us today. And I'm joined by Neve Colfer as well. So she's Oxygen Advantage, and she will be here to help answer any questions that you might have. So this event is being recorded, and I do have a PowerPoint presentation at the very, very start. And that's just really to give you an inroad into breathing and sports performance. I suppose when most people think about breathing, I'm always curious to what do they interpret from that. And there's a lot that can be achieved by bringing breathing training into sports. For the last 23 years, we have seen the benefits of it. And I do see now that there is a greater awareness of the importance of breathing training in sports. And it's not just about recovery, but you also have to think about sleep. You have to think of the benefits of sleep and reduction of injury, benefits of sleep and greater concentration, and also in terms of reducing breathlessness, which I'm going to go through a slide on that. I'm also going to look at a slide on breathing, that it's not just about the airflow that comes in through your nose or mouth, but you can actually influence your respiration downstream. So you can influence 4 stages of breathing, right to oxygen delivery to the tissues and organs, including the heart and brain. And even if you switch to nose breathing during your physical movement, you can literally increase blood flow to the brain by between 5 and 10%, but you can also protect the heart. So we also do breath holds, and there's a lot that we do with Oxygen Advantage. It encompasses body, mind, and sport. So this is going to be theory, and it's also going to be practice as well. So let's kick off. So my personal journey, I came into the breathing space in the late 1990s. That was from having my own health condition, having asthma, having a stuffy nose. And if any of you are listening and you have asthma, you're more likely to have a stuffy nose, and you're also more likely to be tired. So you never just have a breathing issue. You can have a sleep issue on top of that. And if you are a chronic mouth breather because of a stuffy nose, you're more likely to be in an increased stress response. And that's kind of something that's just happening in the background. You get on with life, you do whatever you have to do, but you know that something is holding you back. And of course, it's just one of those things. You never know what's holding you back until you have a comparison to make. We're very scientific based. I think it's really important. I think breathing itself is absolutely amazing. But I try to kind of keep it right center in the way that we communicate it to, both my clients over the years and also instructors. So it's not left to field. It's very practical and it's very accessible as well. It's not just one thing to do, put it that way. We're one of the biggest breathing schools in the world. We have had about 13,000 people go through our professional training courses. That's instructor certificates. That's between Oxygen Advantage and Buteco Clinic. And we have millions of people who have used our books and online courses, etc. So we are one of the leading in terms of the reach that we've had. I'm not sure if we're the biggest, does it really matter, but we're certainly up there. And the only reason that I say that is that we can impart a good degree of experience. So I've 23 years. That's not just about putting breathing out there. That was actively working with clients. So I worked in the first 6-7 years just with people with asthma, then with people with sleep disorders, which include insomnia, snoring, and sleep apnea. For example, I just wrote a book that's published or due to be published. It's published currently in Europe and it's due to be published in the United States in about 2 weeks' time. And that's called The Breathing Cure for Sleep. And it was only then in 2010, I was working a lot with people with anxiety and panic disorder. And on the back of that, then men weren't attending, and that's where Oxygen Advantage was born. So originally, Oxygen Advantage was a means of delivering performance breathing training to the male community to get them out of their heads. So they were coming in for performance, but while they had come in, I was getting them out of their heads and I was helping them to deal with their stress and anxiety. Because I kind of figured back then, maybe it's different now, and possibly it is. I figured back then that men were not going to attend a course for anxiety, but they would attend a course for performance. Now it's about 50-50 male, female. So breathing is in the same mode as your strength and conditioning coach, your physiotherapist, your any professional that's working in a sports environment. And if you think of the core qualities for any leading professional in fitness, they have to have a technical expertise. And the same goes with breathing. You really have to understand the science, the physiology, and to be able to effectively communicate this to your client, to listen to what your client is looking for. Does your client have asthma? Do they have a stuffy nose? Do they have poor recovery post physical exercise? Do they have disproportionate breathlessness? Are they a chest breather rather than breathing from the diaphragm? Do they have poor sleep? So there's a lot going on. And then it's about tailoring breathing exercises to that individual, because you can literally open up the airways. That's the nose. You can open up the lungs. You can improve gas exchange from the lungs into the blood. You can also improve gas exchange from the blood to the tissues and organs. You can dampen the stress response and balance the autonomic nervous system. And there's a lot you can do here, but also tailoring it to each individual, bearing in mind their age, their state of health, and their breathing pattern. And then, of course, you come across stumbling blocks. If the person has a background of panic disorder, how do you react to that? What's the person's relationship to their breathing? And by motivating your client, it really is about improving their breathing patterns. I often feel that there's a lot of people in the breathwork space. They teach breathing exercises, and that's great. It's getting it out there. But they don't necessarily assess their client's breathing from the outset. And they don't also assess their client's breathing post the training, because that's very, very important. Because otherwise, how do you know if your client is actually making progress with their breathing? So we can train and we can change breathing from a number of different perspectives. It's never just about the airflow that you take into your nose. And of course, your nose is in preference to your mouth. You can see the space there, the nasal cavity. Your nose is a minimum of about 30 functions. And yes, when we think about breathing, we normally think about how fast we breathe or how much air we're taking in with each breath. So this gives us minute volume. And that's a very important figure that's often overlooked as well. How much air do you breathe per minute? So if you're doing physical exercise, how much air do you need to work at a particular intensity and for a particular duration? But it's not just that we influence stage one here, we can also influence stage two. Because if we are breathing slow and low, we don't waste so much air to dead space. We're more efficient with our breathing. And with nasal breathing, we can also influence alveolar ventilation. Now, in saying that, also by breathing in and out through the nose, and you pick up nitric oxide, and that helps to redistribute the blood throughout the lungs. It also helps to open up the airways, and it helps to dilate pulmonary blood vessels. You can influence gas exchange from the lungs into the blood. So it was estimated back in 1988 that continuously breathing in and out through your nose, that the partial pressure of oxygen in the blood increased by nearly 10%. And that was by a researcher called Swift. But not only that, you can literally influence oxygen transfer from your blood to your heart, to your brain, to your muscles, and to other tissues. And that should be taken into consideration, because ultimately, what is the purpose of respiration? It's not just about bringing oxygen into the body and that for that oxygen to do a round trip and we breathe it back out again. No, we're always thinking about whatever you bring in, and you can actually breathe less air. So you could take less air into your body here. It doesn't mean that you get less oxygen delivered to the working muscles. And they've looked at athletes who had breathing training. And these individuals, say after a period, they were measured post-treatment at 6 months. So even though they had 22% less ventilation, they were breathing 22% less air, it didn't mean that they had reduced oxygen delivery here, because when they measured lactate post-physical exercise, there was no increase in lactate. So this is where I'd love people to kind of, tease out exactly what can we gonna do with the breath. And this is just one aspect of what we can do with it. I did a TEDx talk fairly recently. The quality of the sound isn't good, but the content is okay. And this was one of the slides that I used. And the talk was really about bringing breathing practice into your training. Now, I did focus on running, but of course, it's not just running, it's really any movement. So when we think about the sensation of breathlessness, And breathlessness is it's a feeling of raw air hunger. And when you experience that sensation of breathlessness, that's going to be even more important than your heart rate. And it's the sensation of breathlessness that's going to influence your rate of perceived exertion. And when you're feeling overly breathless, your brain listens, and that is going to slow you down. So then I suppose I was asking the question when I was putting it together, and I was wondering, well, how would you reduce the sensation of breathlessness? Do you reduce the sensation of breathlessness during physical exercise by doing more physical exercise? Or do you reduce the sensation of breathlessness during exercise by actually focusing on your breathing? Because ultimately it's a breathing issue, especially if you have disproportionate breathlessness. And looking at these bars here, so the primary driver to breathe is carbon dioxide, it's not oxygen. And there's a part of the brain, the central chemoreceptors, that are monitoring carbon dioxide and blood pH. So when carbon dioxide increases, blood pH drops and the brain sends a signal to breathe. But some of us are just overly sensitive to carbon dioxide. Might be because of perfectionist tendencies or trauma, or it could be just genetics, could be somebody with asthma, anxiety, panic disorder. Females, when they go through different phases of the monthly cycle, they can have increased chemosensitivity to carbon dioxide, post-ovulation, mid-luteal phase, for example. So the primary driver to breathe is your ability to tolerate carbon dioxide, your CO2 tolerance, or which of course is influenced by how sensitive are you to the accumulation of carbon dioxide. But when you do physical exercise, because normally physical exercise is done with your mouth open, it's not going to change your CO2 sensitivity very much. And researchers in the physical exercise space would say that it takes extreme hard physical training to reduce your chemosensitivity to carbon dioxide. But of course, they're only looking at physical exercise. We're looking at breathing training. And breathing training can make a huge difference there to reduce your chemosensitivity to carbon dioxide. Why? Because if it's targeted. And I'm not saying that every breathing exercise is going to do this, but I'm saying breathing exercises that are targeted specifically to reduce the sensitivity to carbon dioxide. You also have to consider your ventilatory pattern, like how is the person breathing during their normal everyday? Because breathing is multidimensional. You know, is the person breathing mouth and fast and shallow? Do they breathe with a faster respiratory rate? Do they feel that they are not getting enough air? Are they breathing upper chest? Because that breathing pattern during the day is going to also influence their breathing pattern during exercise. And faulty breathing it's pretty common in athletes as well. There were one paper that's quite recent. Well, it was a study of 1,933 athletes in Japan, and it looked at their breathing from a biomechanical point of view. And the conclusion was that 90% of athletes have dysfunctional breathing from a biomechanical point of view. So it's important then to look at your everyday breathing patterns, because that may be holding you back. And of course, you're not going to know of it unless you actually assess breathing or you have your breathing assessed. Now, the blood acid base balance, this of course is primarily influenced by your respiration as well. But the implications of this would be that if you're breathing hard and fast, you're getting rid of too much carbon dioxide. This in turn is increasing blood pH. This then causes reduced oxygen delivery throughout the body. And it also increases neuronal excitability, brain cell excitability. So, you know, getting more oxygen delivered throughout the body isn't a case of breathing more air. It's the opposite. And if you look at an individual who is in very, very poor shape, that individual will be excessively breathless during physical exercise. They are breathing loads of air, but you know that there's something not quite right with that person. They may have poor health, or at the very least, you would say that they have poor fitness, but maybe they have poor breathing. O2 delivery, physical training here has the lead. You know, you're driving movement, you're strengthening the cardiovascular system, but even breathing training has some impact here because of the transport of oxygen from the lungs into the blood and from the blood to the tissues. Respiratory muscle fatigue, if the diaphragm gets tired, just like any other muscle, it gets tired. And if the diaphragm breathing muscle gets tired, well, the body is going to sacrifice other functions to maintain respiration. So the body cares about breathing because, you know, if breathing isn't sustained, It's quite an important function, and the body is going to make sure that other functions such as running are sacrificed to maintain respiration. So what happens if the diaphragm gets tired? Well, there's one theory is that blood is stolen from the legs to feed the diaphragm. So if you see an athlete running down the track and the next thing is their legs start going from under them, is that a buildup of hydrogen ion, or is it diaphragm fatigue? And is that causing blood stealing? And finally, the last and probably one of the more important ones as well in causing the sensation and influencing the sensation of breathlessness during physical exercise is the psychological perception. And again, physical training will make some inroads here, but the main way to help to reduce the perception of breathlessness is by actually targeting it from a breathing perspective. So this is often forgotten about. And the reason being is because it's expected that physical training will train your breathing, but physical training doesn't train your breathing. And the reason being is because most athletes do physical exercise with their mouth open. And any athlete knows that if you want to train something, you have to add an extra load onto it. So you can target by adding an extra load, by breathing in and out through the nose, by doing breath holding, by also changing your breathing patterns during rest, by having your mouth closed. And that in turn then causes your body to make adaptations. Now, the one sport that does influence your breathing is swimming. And the reason being is because, especially when you're doing the front crawl, the weight of your body, the water is pressing against you, you're breathing against resistance. So whenever you want to think about training a system, and we're talking here about the respiratory system, we have to ask the question, how can we add an extra load onto that? I'd like you to give this a go. The camera isn't on you. This is just to kind of give you feedback, because you might be wondering, well, how well am I breathing in my everyday? Now, this isn't perfect. This is called the body oxygen level test. And it's a test of how long you can hold your breath for comfortably following an exhalation. So you can see the instruction of it here, and I'll talk you through it. You do need a watch or a phone with a second hand or timer of some sort. So whenever you're ready, I would like you to take a normal breath in and out through your nose, and just hold your nose, and then time it in seconds. How long can you hold your breath for until you feel the first definite desire to breathe, and then to let go, but to breathe in through your nose, and your breathing should be normal. So it's the length of time that you hold your breath for comfortably and still have normal breathing when you resume breathing. As I said, it's not perfect. No assessment is perfect. But what this assessment will give you is, it gives you some feedback of your perception of breathlessness. Say, for example, if we have somebody with panic disorder, they can have a very evolved maladaptive alarm towards suffocation, based on genetics or based on conditioning of prior experience. But it also gives you indirect feedback of your sensitivity to carbon dioxide. Now, in short, a long breath hold time is good, and a short breath hold time is not so good. So if we had, say, somebody with long COVID, and there can be dysregulation of the autonomic nervous system, their breath hold time could be less than 10 seconds. But the cutoff point here is about 25 seconds or so. So if your breath hold time is above 25 seconds, it indicates functional breathing. And if your breath hold time is less than 25 seconds, it indicates dysfunctional breathing. Now, if you're down around 20 seconds, of course, you're pretty close to it. But say you're down around 10 seconds, and now you're wondering, well, why do I get breathless when I'm going up a flight of stairs? Why do I feel that I can't keep up with my peers? And why am I running out of air? Why do I feel that I can't take a deep breath? So this is where I can kind of give you some feedback. Now, of course, we use a number of different assessments to assess a client's breathing, which is important, because once you assess a client's breathing, especially a fitness individual, you want to have a very targeted approach. You identify where are they going wrong with their breathing patterns, and then you can tailor breathing exercise specifically to suit them. Because breathing is multidimensional. It's not just, about the biomechanics. It's not just about the diaphragm. The diaphragm often gets attention because maybe, it's a muscle. And what often doesn't get attention, which is even, I would say, if not as important, is the biochemical dimension of breathing. because the biochemical dimension of breathing is looking at the gases, carbon dioxide, oxygen, and nitric oxide. And of course, carbon dioxide is really playing a significant role. It's not just that, you know, it's a waste gas. People often say, well, oxygen is the good gas and carbon dioxide is the bad gas. Well, we produce carbon dioxide internally. It's a byproduct of our metabolism, but we only breathe out 15%. We actually hold on to 85% of it. It's carbon dioxide that influences your blood circulation, including blood flow to the heart and brain. So if you commonly have cold hands and brain fog and cold feet, you have to be asking the question, are you breathing just a little bit faster and harder than what you should be? Do you spend time with your mouth open? Because it's very common, in terms of poor breathing patterns. Sorry, this here is the biochemical here, and this here is the biomechanical. And then we have the psychophysiological. So this is the mind-body connection. So we can influence our state of mind via the breath. We can stimulate the vagus nerve. We can induce relaxation. We can help to bring down the heart rate. So if you're going into a stressful or a challenging situation, and if you're feeling some nerves, which can be normal, do you have a tool to help bring down the speed of your heart rate and to tell your brain that you're safe so that you're not going into that situation in a fight or flight response? Because if your brain interprets that the body is under threat, this isn't going to be a time for creativity. This isn't going to be a time for decision making. This is a time for survival. So it's very important whenever we are going into a situation that we're able to have control over the autonomic nervous system. Because otherwise, anxiety and the degree of anxiety that we could be facing going into that situation, number one, it's going to sabotage flow. It's going to sabotage performance. So having the ability to be able to self-regulate is very important. And the other aspect is knowing that you have this ability, going into a situation, you're more likely to put yourself into a challenging situation because you know that your physiology is not going to let you down. I've used it hundreds of times. Going into a challenging situation, getting up. My challenging situation would be, say, TV interviews, or going to speak to a large group of people, 1,200 people, for example. I spoke to one group, 400 people for 7 hours with 10-minute breaks every hour, but without slides. And the content was different from start to finish. So, of course, you need to be in an absolute perfect state of mind for that. And you can access this state whereby you're fully immersed in what you're doing and the thinking mind is put aside, because when you've practiced and trained something for so long, over so many years, your brain has stored all of that information. It's all in there. But all you have to do is get out of your own way. You have to put the critical mind aside so that it's you and the game, or you and the task at hand. And it's in the absence of thought. Okay, a thought might come in. So maybe I'll rephrase that. It's in the absence of thinking that you're fully immersed in what you're doing and the right action happens by itself. So it's a state of bliss, and that would be flow. I'm going to bring in Adam. So Adam is an oxygen advantage instructor. And so to say a few words, I think it's always good. You're not just listening to me, but somebody who's in the space, in the fitness space. So Adam, I see you there. You're very welcome. It's all yours.
Okay, can you hear me now? I don't know if you can hear me or not.
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay, hiya. So this is going to be very, very unscripted. So Patrick, if you can give me a bit of guidance about what you'd like to hear, that would be great, please.
Well, unscripted is always, it's good now because you have an opportunity. You have no safety net. So this is where you want control over the autonomic nervous system.
Yes,
I suppose
indeed.
a little bit of your background.
Okay.
What sport are you in? Do you work with clients? Why did you go into breathing? What did you get out of it?
Yeah. Okay. Well, first things first, I am a freediver. I'm also a kendo instructor. Kendo is a Japanese martial art. And I'm up here in the Highlands of Scotland. So for me, when it came to oxygen advantage, when it came to becoming an instructor, there were a couple of pathways into it for me. Prior to all of that, I'd been doing martial arts for years. So, for example, meditation was something that I was aware of, but breath training, as we know, is very different to meditation. And with the freediving, I managed to derive a lot of benefits that I wasn't expecting from it. A lot of it was to do with mental resilience. And that kind of poured into the martial arts, which proved to be invaluable. So I started becoming really curious about what we can actually do with our breath from a mechanical point of view, not so much spiritual in terms of meditation. And I was already fit, and to be candid, I was already fit. But what I was finding was outside of the sport, my breathing was shot to pieces. So I'd find myself on the sofa and I'd suddenly gasp for air because I hadn't realized that I'd been holding my breath for a while. And I noticed that I had a dry mouth. So basically, all of the things when I started reading the Oxygen Advantage material were talking about dysfunctional breathing. And I could pretty much tick every single box on what is dysfunctional breathing. So it was like, right, okay, um, let's look at this. Let's see what we can get from it. So that was my journey into Oxygen Advantage. Um, and then I decided after having done it for a while that this is something that I wanted to teach. Not so much to freedivers, because I'm not a freediving instructor, but it was certainly something that I wanted to start off teaching to my students in Kendo, and then decided that it's something that I wanted to expand into and to start teaching other people who do sport as well. So that's where I am right now. I've been teaching quite a few people who practice judo up here. And one thing that's missing from that model was the non-sport people, the people who would actually benefit from um, getting their breathing functional, who are perhaps more sedentary. So this is the project that's becoming really interesting. Up here in Inverness, we have an oxygen therapy center, and that is based around a hyperbaric chamber. Now, for those of you who don't know what a hyperbaric chamber is, you might have heard of decompression chambers. So when people go diving and they need to, come back up in order to prevent getting the bends, they will go into a decompression chamber. But hyperbaric chambers are used in oxygen therapy for short-term therapeutic intervention on, for example, injuries. So I thought this would be a really good fit in terms of what we do in Oxygen Advantage. We're currently talking, and there's a lot of excitement around it because they have a wait list. And one of the things that they mentioned was they find that people get quite panicky. They get a little bit anxious about going into a chamber that they're basically locked into for about an hour or so. And some of them need to wear masks, respirator type masks. And what we've basically decided is that I will show them basic breathing techniques that will help them derive even more benefit from being in the hyperbaric chamber, alongside being able to manage their anxiety, if they have any, around going into it. And then that's something that they take into their daily life. We can call it homework. So they get two things from the center. They get short-term intervention in terms of injury treatment, but they also get to learn functional breathing. And that's where we are right now up here. Yeah.
Great, great,
Mhm.
great. Thank you very much, Adam.
Yeah, of course.
So what I'm going to do is just go with a couple of slides, and Adam was talking about functional breathing, and I'll kind of explain what that is a little bit in detail. And then we will look at dynamic breath holding as well. So I'm not just going to do the easy stuff with you. I'm actually going to do a couple of stressor exercises too, because sometimes it's good to actually feel it, that you can really drive up that intense feeling of air hunger, and you can go beyond what you would normally do during physical exercise. We talked earlier on about the psychological perception of breathlessness. We also talked about reducing the chemosensitivity to carbon dioxide. We talked about strengthening the diaphragm. So, of course, there's a number of ways of doing that. So coming back now to our slides, and just bear with me one moment. So if you are deciding, or if you feel that you would like to start teaching breathing to your clients, there are a number of different options, and I'd like just to go through these here for a moment. With level 1, this is our functional breathing instructor training. This is all online, and it's different modules that you have access to with lifelong access, and it's very affordable. So it kind of brings you through it so that you can then start teaching this to your clients. There is an exam, it's self-paced, and you get a certificate in functional breathing. We also have breathing for yoga instructor training. And a couple of years ago, I wrote a book called Breathing for Yoga. And I was kind of intrigued because very often, we feel that in the Western world, there's an idea out there that if you take a full deep breath, more oxygen is roaming throughout the body and getting delivered throughout the body. And that's not true. And when we looked at the original breathing in yoga, there was a lot of emphasis on conservation of the breath and suspension of the breath and breathing less air. And yogi instructors could hold their breath quite comfortably for 3 minutes or so. Earlier on, I had you do the Bolt score, and you probably, some of you will be down around 10, 15 seconds, and you might be a little bit surprised by that. It's kind of normal. It's our modern lifestyle, which is, not great in terms of breathing. So anyway, this is breathing for yoga instructor training, and it's all online. They're all new courses, and it's quite accessible there in the price. It's $396, provided that you use the discount code at the bottom. So the discount code is fitness20, and that's valid for 7 days. Now, $396 is about €350, or about £340. So that's an entire training that's online. And then we have the advanced tier. This includes everything. This, you get the online, but you also get the live sessions with myself. It's 7 classes with myself. And also we have a monthly refresher meeting. There's a community built around it. So there is a lot more with the advanced in terms of the information and the presentations and everything else. And the price does reflect that. It's a lot more detail and you get a lot more out of it. So the price here is $876. And that's when you use that code, 20%. There's also special offer. So this is the next 24 hours. You get a 20% off, a free starter pack when you sign up in the next 24 hours. And these are different products that I brought out over the years to help with my own clients. One was a sports mask. Another is a nasal dilator. Another is myotape. One is a Buteco belt. So these are different products that we use. So for example, if you had a runner with a deviated septum, well, they may not like to maintain nasal breathing because they feel that they are not getting enough air. So we use a nasal dilator. So it was $150 worth of essential breathing tools here, and you get that free. So that's when you book the advanced instructor training in the next 24 hours. So just to give you an insight into the training portal, it's really well designed. It's very accessible. The feedback on it has been very, very good. The functional breathing one in this instance, it is 15 modules. Each module has a presentation, a video, and then a quiz. And you work your way through it. And then you also work with clients. So you have the client intake form, how to assess your client's breathing, and different aspects of it here, insurance providers. And it's really about, I suppose if you're already working in a particular modality in health and fitness, and many of your clients are coming into you and maybe their breathing is holding them back. And now you could offer a different or, an added service to that. So I'm going to go on to the breathing practice, and Niamh, if you don't mind sharing it to a gallery view so that we can kind of see everybody. Okay. The first one that I would like to do is, I'm going to start very easy. This is small breath holds. If your mind is racing, it's not easy to pay attention to your breathing. It's not easy to be mindful. But is there a way to stimulate the vagus nerve for the brain to understand or realize that the body is safe? So we use small breath holds in this instance. And the other thing with this is that not everybody is comfortable paying attention to your breathing. So you might have a client who is after having some trauma in their past, and they feel very uncomfortable paying attention to their breath. And at the same time, they have faster breathing and harder breathing. So this is an exercise to help calm you down, even though you don't have to pay attention to your breathing. It's a little bit like box breathing, but it's slightly different as well. So we lead with this one. So whenever you're ready, I would like you to take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and just hold the inside of your nose for a count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let go, but breathe in through your nose, and now breathe normally for about 15 seconds or so. So as you hold your breath, there is a gas called nitric oxide that pools inside your nasal airway. Then you let go, you carry that nitric oxide laden air into your lungs. Nitric oxide is a bronchodilator. It helps open up the airways. It can also be good for people with asthma. If you have chest tightness, if you're feeling queasy or coughing, hold your breath. And again, take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let go, but breathe in through your nose and breathe normally for about 15 seconds or so. So you're just breathing normally for about 15 seconds. So don't worry about how you're breathing. And again, take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let go, but breathe in through your nose and breathe normally for about 15 seconds or so. So I'm going to do this for about a minute, and then I'm going to go into breathe light and to see what changes can we experience as we do a particular breathing practice. And again, take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let go, but breathe in through your nose and breathe normally for about 15 seconds or so. You're not going to feel much in terms of air hunger from this exercise. It's just a very basic emergency exercise that if, for example, you have labored breathing or agitated mind. So the next time that your mind is agitated, practice this. And again, take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let go, but breathe in through your nose. I'm going to now extend this to decongest your nose. Don't do this if you're pregnant. If you do have a background of panic disorder or anxiety, you have to go gentle enough. So here we are going to kind of continue with this exercise, but I want to see, does it make a difference to your nose? Earlier on, I said that you can influence your airways. So what I would like you to do is take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold. And now gently nod your head up and down, holding your breath for between 5 and 10 times. So gently nodding your head up and down, holding your breath for between 5 and 10 times, and then to let go and breathe in through your nose. So your nose is linked with your lungs. And if you have a stuffy nose, the stuffiness of the nose isn't just isolated to your nose. It will also travel into your lungs. So you're more likely to have narrowing of the bronchioles. So this is an exercise to help shift mucus. It's a little bit stronger than the other one, but it's also an exercise to help open up the nose itself. Now, the only reason I'm having you do this one is because I want you to see, does it work? Okay, so don't just listen to me. With a group of people, it's going to work or it's not. Take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold your nose, and just gently nod your head up and down, holding your breath, this time for about 10, 15 head nods. Now, if you find it very uncomfortable, just do what you can do. But this is not holding your breath for comfortable time. This is just a little bit of a push. And then to let go, to breathe in through your nose. And in terms of airways, doctors years ago used to say if a child had asthma, they used to encourage the child to swim. And a child who swims, very often, they will stay underwater. They will dive down, or they will swim down to the bottom of the pool, come back up. They're doing breath holds. So it's a very natural thing to do. And of course, maybe the doctor didn't realize it, but what was actually helping to open up the airways was that the child was actually swimming underwater and that they weren't breathing so much air because they were holding their breath or they were releasing the air under the water. Does that make sense? If you breathe less air, your airway's open. Simple as that. What are we doing here? Breathing less air. And again, take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold your nose. And now just gently, Rosita, I think you took a breath in there. So it's only a normal breath in through your nose and then a normal breath out through your nose, and then you hold your nose and then you're just gently nodding your head, yeah? So you hold it at the end of the breath out. And you don't need to take the full deep breaths. And then you let go. How are you feeling with that? You will feel a little air hunger. That's normal. Some of you may not feel all that much air hunger. Well, then you've got pretty good breathing. So if you find that you have a lot of air hunger by doing your head nods for 15 head nods, you know then that your breathing has some room for improvement. And I'm just going to do this once more because we should notice if it's working or not. It will be interesting. There's about 119 people here. Who is it working for and who is it not? Anyway, take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold your nose. And this time, I'd like you to hold your breath for as long as you can, but be able to breathe in and out through the nose at the end. So not to overdo it. You're holding your breath, nodding your head up and down, holding your breath, gently nodding your head up and down, relaxing into your body. But it's not about overdoing it. I do need you to listen to your body and then to let go, but to breathe in through your nose. So I'm curious to see, is your nose the same? Is it worse? Or is it better? Is it easier to breathe through? So that's an exercise that you can use if you have a head cold or if you have hay fever. And any of you with a stuffy nose, you don't just have a stuffy nose, it also impacts your cognitive function. So if you think of your athletes, you think of people in performance, a stuffy nose, you're 2 to 3 times more likely to experience a sleep issue. If you have a sleep issue, you're more likely to experience rumination of the mind. If you have a stuffy nose, you're more likely to mouth breathe. If you mouth breathe, this influences the parts of the brain that are associated with rumination or overthinking. So the default mode network, just research now more recently, looking at the impact of mouth breathing versus nasal breathing. So if you want a quieter mind, it's very important to breathe in and out through the nose, but people might find it a little bit difficult to breathe in and out through their nose if they have a lot of nasal congestion. Now, to help with nasal congestion, practice that exercise whenever your nose is stuffy, and then improve your underlying breathing patterns to get your Bolt score above 20, 25 seconds. When your Bolt score is above 20 and 25 seconds, you will have far less nasal congestion. I would always say to my students coming in, if your Bolt score is continuously at 10 seconds and 15 seconds, whatever symptoms you have associated with your nose, you're going to continue to have those symptoms. Because when your Bolt score is low, your everyday breathing is a bit faster, a bit harder, a bit upper chest, and that's feeding into the nasal congestion. So everybody in breathing, well, not everybody, very often you hear the instruction, take a deep breath if you're stressed, or oxygen is good and carbon dioxide is bad. There's kind of an idea that, it's good to take full deep breaths. I've heard it many, many times. Now we're going to do the opposite. And what I would like you to do is to put one hand on your chest and one hand just above your navel. And just pay attention to your breathing starting off, and don't really care about your breathing anyway. Like what I mean by that is that you're kind of having a passive approach or a passive observation of your breathing. So it's not about analyzing your breathing. So don't worry about how you're doing it. You're breathing. That's good. So now what I would like you to do is you're paying attention to the slightly colder air coming into your nose and the slightly warmer air as it's leaving your nose. And as you feel the airflow coming into your nose, I would like you to start slowing down the speed of your breathing. So to take a very, very soft or short breath in through your nose, and then to allow a really relaxed and a slow and a gentle breath out. I would like you to imagine that you're literally breathing the minimal amount of air that you can breathe at this point. And if you breathe about 30% less air than what you normally do, you're going to feel air hunger. So the objective here is to soften and slow down the speed of your breathing to the point that you feel that you are not getting enough air. I need you to have the same sensation now that you're doing the exercise as what you would have when you go for a fast walk. So a degree of breathlessness. And all you're doing is just taking a shorter breath in through your nose and a relaxed and a slow and a gentle breath out through your nose, or a softer breath in through your nose and a relaxed and a slow and a gentle breath out. And this also is a good gauge of your ability to hold your attention on one thing. The breath will tell you a lot about your concentration. The breath will tell you a lot about your attention span. And of course, if we want to improve our attention span, we have to work on it. And one way to do that is to be attentive to something. So right now, you're being attentive to your breath, but not only attentive to your breath. If you're breathing less air here and you feel air hunger, the air hunger is telling you that it's because of an accumulation of carbon dioxide in your lungs and blood. And as carbon dioxide increases, it's going to increase blood flow to the brain. And as carbon dioxide increases, blood pH drops ever so slightly, and that reduces brain cell excitability. So the whole aspect of concentration and reducing rumination. You know, people often say, well, do mindfulness to reduce rumination. No, start off with addressing your everyday breathing patterns. The brain consumes 20% of our oxygen, and we can literally influence blood circulation, oxygen, and pH. We can influence neuronal excitability, 83 billion brain cells. And it's not by breathing more air. It's by breathing that little bit less. And it's not that you need to be breathing this way all the time. So you might find it easier to hold your attention now on your breathing because you're assisting with increased blood flow, with increased carbon dioxide, with that slight drop to blood pH, which is happening to have a reduction in what's called neuronal excitability. So the brain, by regulating breathing, regulates its own excitability. But how does it do that? It does that through carbon dioxide. So after this, look at the properties of carbon dioxide. Look at what it does. Look at the physiology behind breathing. You know, if one is teaching breathing exercise, one should know exactly what's going on to the best of their ability. I know the science is continuous. The science is still catching up. But the mechanism behind carbon dioxide and increased blood flow, this is known for decades. Bohr effect was discovered back in 1904, so over 120 years ago. So even now that you're breathing a little bit less air, and I would like you to feel that air hunger because I would like you to experience it, that's not a deprivation of oxygen, because the fact that you're breathing less air signifies there's an increase of carbon dioxide. Again, as carbon dioxide increases, blood pH drops a little bit, and hemoglobin, which is the main carrier of oxygen, starts releasing oxygen more readily. That's called the Bohr effect. So it's ironic, you're breathing less air, but you're having increased blood flow and increased oxygen delivery. Take a rest of that. I'm going to come back to that exercise. How are you though with the air hunger? Did any of you feel air hunger? Because I know it's your first time doing it, so yeah, you felt air hunger. Has anybody noticed any change in the temperature of your hands internally? Not because you had your hands against the body, by the way, but internally, is there anything, any change there? Did anybody notice any change in the saliva in the mouth? Is your mouth drier? Is it the same, or is it increased watery saliva in the mouth? So you see the responses of people, and this is what breathing is about. This is a direct inroad into influencing your blood circulation, your oxygen delivery, your airways, but also your autonomic nervous system. Vance, just go back to normal breathing now. So during the exercise, great, you had air hunger, that's super. And then after the exercise, just go back to your normal breathing. So we practice breathing exercises to make adaptations so that in our normal everyday breathing, we have better breathing patterns. We don't have to think about our breathing then. But if you think of the brain as a human organ, we can literally influence blood flow and oxygen delivery to that brain. That has a massive effect. We can influence the autonomic nervous system. We can influence our sleep quality. And we don't often think about this, even say in terms of athletes holding attention, but even going beyond this, mental health issues. You know, and this is where a deep dive, not just scratching the surface with breathing. It's never just about scratching the surface. Yeah, if you're pregnant, we don't want to do anything that may cause that little bit of a stress to you. So congratulations, but don't practice any of the techniques. Yeah. So I'd like you to give that a go again. One hand on your chest, one hand just above your navel, and kind of play with it a little bit. Can you soften your breathing so that you're taking less air into your body to the point that you feel air hunger, but not to the point that you get stressed? So if you're getting stressed or if you have involuntary contractions of the diaphragm, take a rest for a little bit and then come back to it. So what I would like you to do is make your breath in shorter breath in, or a softer breath in, and a really relaxed and a slow and a gentle breath out. So you're gently softening and slowing down the speed of your breathing to the point that you feel you would like to get in more air. Now, as you do this practice, I would like you to pay attention to the saliva in your mouth. Your mouth will change. It could go drier. It could be the same. Or you could have increased watery saliva. So we want to check in. How is your body responding to the uncomfortable sensation of air hunger? But it's not really uncomfortable. Well, you could say it is. Of course, that's going to depend on the person. But it's the same sensation that you would experience if you go for a walk. So if you're walking, you feel breathless. The only difference is we're doing it while sitting. How do you do it? Take a softer breath in through your nose. So you're really slowing down the speed of the air coming into your nostrils, almost that your breath in is imperceptible. Oh, Roz, it's gone too far. So if it gets too far, you just take a break and then you come back to it. So you're taking a very, very soft and slow breath in, and then a really relaxed and a slow and a gentle breath out. So you're under breathing by about 30% or so. You're checking in, what's the saliva in the mouth, the internal temperature of your hands, not just because you have your hands against your body, but internally. And you can test this yourself. You know, you could have your hands sitting on a table and breathe less air and see if you can literally influence your blood circulation. 50,000 miles of blood vessels throughout the body. So the next time somebody tells you to take a deep breath or a full big breath, you know that it's not the ideal thing to do because it could likely blow off too much carbon dioxide, which in turn is going to cause a reduction of, it's going to reduce your blood circulation or cause a narrowing of blood circulation and a reduction of blood flow to the brain. And you might even feel lightheaded. Or somebody says, slow down your breathing. And you slow down your breathing, but in the process, you take full breaths. It can be still over breathing. It's never just about the speed of the breath. It's also the tidal volume. It's never just about the diaphragm. It's the psychophysiological, it's the biochemical dimension. And that's not complicating it. That's just respiration. Take a rest at that. Take a rest. Did any of you have air hunger there, by the way? Yeah. Did any of you notice any change or not in the saliva in the mouth? What did you notice? You can put it into the chat. What does it tell you if you have increased watery saliva in the mouth? Does it tell you that your body is ready for the digestion of food? Maybe you feel a bit sleepy as well. Yeah. So we can, the autonomic nervous system is it's like a seesaw. As one side goes up, the other side goes down. If you can dampen the stress response and increase relaxation, it's very helpful for recovery. We can't stay in this increased sympathetic drive all the time, even though modern society is kind of pushing us into it. And that's where the breath comes in. We have some way of helping to counter the stresses of our normal everyday life. Makes things a bit easier, yeah? So we did breathe light, that it's carbon dioxide, not oxygen. That's the primary driver of your breathing. And we also do this with physical exercise. We train with movement with reduced breathing, and that causes the body to make adaptations. I spoke about this paper here. This was George Dallam. He's a sports scientist, and he had a group of recreational athletes breathe through their nose exclusively for 6 months. Now, he didn't look at their everyday breathing patterns, so he didn't improve their everyday breathing, but he just had them do physical exercise with their mouth closed. And then when he tested them on a graded exercise test, they were able to go as hard and fast with nasal breathing versus mouth breathing, but with 22% less ventilation. And this is even though they're breathing 22% less air, it wasn't accompanied by an increase in lactate. And if there was an increase in lactate, it would indicate that there wasn't enough oxygen getting delivered. So it's not about the air that comes into your body. You have to be thinking, what's your body doing with that air? But how are you breathing to influence that? So there's a lot going on there in terms of nasal breathing versus mouth breathing. You might like this. It was only put out there a couple of days ago. Neve will probably share I'm sure she will, the link to it. So I wanted to give a talk that if you want to reduce breathlessness during physical exercise, the objective then is to breathe less. It's not physical training, but it's by your breathing practice. So there's a few different tools there that will be helpful. Now, we also do dynamic breath holds. This is where we really push the individual. I'll do a dynamic breath hold in about 10 minutes, just to kind of get you to feel it. Now, a dynamic breath hold is a stressor. And there's two main ways of stressing the human body via breathing. One is hyperventilation, which we're not going to practice, but we do practice it and can practice it in the oxygen advantage. And the other is breath holding. Now, we don't typically stack hyperventilation and breath holding together. Or if we do it under a very controlled situation, because stacking one stressor on top of another one, there's a point at which a good stress becomes a bad stress. You have to be careful with your blood oxygen saturation. You never want to be hyperventilating and then doing long breath holds to cause your blood oxygen saturation to go below 60%, because that would indicate a reduction of blood flow to the brain. I don't think it's good for brain health. So hence we don't do it. There's also a test with that you can practice. What's your maximum breathlessness test? So you'll find this on our website. And this is when you take a normal breath in and out through your nose, and you walk as many paces as you can while you hold your breath. And then when you let go, you should be able to breathe in through your nose and to recover your breathing within 2 to 3 breaths. So this is called the maximum breathlessness test, and it's going to measure the upper limit of tolerance of breathlessness. If you're an athlete, the minimum that we need is 60 paces. And with athletes, we look for 80 plus paces, because we want these individuals, especially if they're sprinters, to be able to have a high upper limit of tolerance of breathlessness. Now, this is physiological. That's adaptation to carbon dioxide, but also psychological. So in terms of the perception of breathlessness. So I'm coming back to here. If you are thinking about doing breathing training, of course, we'd love for you to join us. I think you would be very, very happy with the training that we provide. It's always has been my mission for the last 23 years. So the functional breathing, this is a level 1 training. Everything is online. It's self-paced. You get access to it straight away. And it's got presentations and videos and then little quizzes. With that, then there's a certificate in functional breathing. It gives you the tools working with your clients, looking at sleep, heart rate variability, stress, but also oxygenation, blood flow. So it's pretty good. It's pretty good start off. And you see the price there is $396. That's provided you use that code FITNESS20 to get to 20% discount. And then there is a training then for yoga instructors to bring oxygen advantage. So this is specifically tailored for yoga, bringing oxygen advantage into your yoga studio. And I often feel as well, a yoga instructor, they can be teaching yoga classes, but why not teach breathing classes as well? They have the space, they have the clients, and now you're adding one extra thing. Now, you might say that breathing in yoga is going to change breathing in yoga. Yes, it can. Of course it can. But what I'm going to say is that this is going to be much more targeted. How should you breathe during yoga? Do you have your clients take full deep breaths? Do you have them breathe faster? Do you have them hold their breath? And what about breathing off the mat? So say, for example, you have a client, a student, and your student is finding it difficult to keep up, that they can't practice the asanas because they feel too breathless. That's not necessarily their yoga. That's not necessarily it's not going to be the breathing during the yoga class that's going to correct that. Because really where the yoga instructor needs to be looking at is, how is that person breathing outside of the yoga class? How are they breathing in their normal everyday life? If you're experiencing breathlessness during one particular event, it's not just about your breathing there, but it's about your breathing outside of that. And then the advanced, this is bringing everything together. So you have the online, you can start straight away. It's all there. And then we have 7 by 2 hour classes with myself. And as far as I know as well, these are in about 4 weeks' time. So the 7 by 2 hour sessions start in about 4 weeks. There's a community with this. You get a lot of PowerPoint presentations. We're bringing in a lot of new information. So it is more expensive, but I think you would see that it's worth the price. It's $876, which is in fairness accessible, provided that you use that code. And also for the advanced, you can get a full pack, $150 worth of materials by signing up in the next 24 hours. That's by using the code there. So our training will give you your clients. It's really about helping your clients to, number one, identify how well do they breathe, to bring in breathing practices specific for your clients, which cover a wide range of fields. It's not just about teaching somebody how to relax. How about recovery? How about using it in specific situations? How about opening up the nose? How about improving sleep? How about if you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, how can you fall back asleep? Or if you have disproportionate breathlessness during exercise, or if you have overthinking, rumination of the mind. Because the oxygen advantage, we have 3 main pillars: body, mind, and sport. Mind is a big one too. Mind gets about 33%. 1/3 goes to the mind. And it's not just paying attention or directed attention. Of course, that's important, but it's about looking at the very factors that influence rumination of the mind, such as blood flow to the brain, blood pH, oxygen delivery, nervous system, and sleep. Because you could be practicing mindfulness all day long, but if you're waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, you will have an increased tendency to ruminate. You could be practicing mindfulness, but then if you're going around with your mouth open, well, that can influence the default mode network and increase rumination. Dysfunctional breathing is putting us into an increased stress response, so an increased sympathetic drive, which in turn is going to be causing rumination. So if you feel that you're stuck in your head and you want to be able to direct your attention to what you're doing, it must be one of the best skills that we can learn as being human. Our education system doesn't teach us how to be able to hold our attention. You know, we spend 12 years in formal education and we are trained how to think, how to reason, how to break information into tiny pieces. So we are trained how to think. The mind is trained into a sharp analytical tool. But the problem is that many of us, we can't stop thinking. So, of course, there's a purpose for thinking. Practical thinking is very important, solve a problem. But there's a time at which our thinking is unproductive. There's a time that our thinking is very negative. And there's a time that our thinking is just like a broken record. And we're so stuck in our head. And being so stuck in our head, we don't really appreciate what's going on around us, because how can we appreciate what's going on around us? Because we're stuck in our head. So in order to appreciate life, we need to be able to connect with life. But how do we get out of our head? So how do we get out of that ruminating mind? And it does go beyond mindfulness. But yeah, so it's about bringing this into it with the experience and the science. The science is very important too. So I'm sure you're all dying to do a long breath hold. So let's give this one a go. Just a couple of caveats with this one. If you're over 60, you have to go very, very gentle. Okay. So what I would say is only hold your breath for about 5 to 10 paces. You can try it, but don't go beyond 10 paces. If you have panic disorder or anxiety, you have to go easy as well. I would say don't go beyond 10 paces. So I'm not going to go extreme with you because, of course, I have no idea how you're going to react. But at the same time, I want to give you a little bit of a taste of it. So for this one, I would like you to stand up. If you feel comfortable, stand up with this. And so there is a group, if you have any serious medical conditions, cardiovascular issues, mental health issues, or any serious medical conditions, don't go beyond 10 paces. 10 paces will be okay. And so whenever you're ready, take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and hold your nose and walk holding your breath for 10 paces. So we'll do a couple of easy ones first. Now, this exercise also is useful for helping to open up your nose. And this exercise also is very useful at helping to quieten the mind. So not to go beyond 10 paces. Please don't go beyond 10 paces for the moment, yeah? So again, if you feel at some point that your mind is, lost in that kind of thought activity and you feel that your head is just a little bit heavy, how do you help to break the momentum of thinking? Doing a breath hold can be very important. And again, take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold your nose and walk, holding your breath for about 10 paces or so. So you're walking, holding your breath for 10 paces, and then to let go, but to breathe in through your nose. And then we will just do one more. And for some of you, I would like you to stay on 10 paces. And for others, we're going to increase you. So don't worry. Even if you have to stay at 10 paces, you're still going to get something out of it. Yeah. But it's safe. That's the most important thing. So again, whenever you're ready, take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and hold your nose and walk, holding your breath for 10 paces. And then to let go, but to breathe in through your nose. So now I'm going to increase it to 15, 20 paces, yeah? But many of you, I would like you to stay with just 10 paces. Especially if you're susceptible to panic disorder, anxiety. If you're pregnant, please don't do it full stop. I mentioned that earlier on. Cardiovascular issues, only 10 paces. Over 60, only 10. It's just, as we get a bit older, we don't want to overdo it either. So whenever you're ready, take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and hold your nose and jog, holding your breath for 15 to 20 paces. Jog, holding your breath for 15 to 20 paces, then to let go, to breathe in through your nose, and then to breathe normal. And bear in mind that some of you just stick with the 10. So now we're going to go into stress territory. So you're doing a breath hold, oxygen can't get in, carbon dioxide can't get out. So there's going to be at some point a drop of oxygen in the blood and an increase to carbon dioxide. And that in turn then can cause the body to make adaptations to delay lactic acid and fatigue. Also adds an extra load onto the diaphragm, helps to reduce the perception of breathlessness. It's very good for preparation for pre-physical exercise and things like that. So you are putting yourself into a primal fear of air hunger, a primal sensation of air hunger, and you're surrendering to it, which can be important. So how about 20? Are you fine with that? Take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and hold your nose, and now jog, gently jogging, holding your breath for 20 paces. So gently jogging, holding your breath for 20 paces. And then you let go, but breathe in through your nose, and then just walk a couple of paces to recover. So always walk a couple of paces then to recover. Do any of you notice your nose opening up now? Yeah. So again, this is another way to do it. So it's very helpful for exercise-induced bronchoconstriction. So anybody who gets, for example, exercise-induced asthma or exercise-induced airway narrowing, we weave different techniques into their training so that we can help to reduce the risk of it. So now we're going to go for 25 paces. So whenever you're ready, and only do it if you're comfortable. Don't listen to me. Please listen to your bodies, yeah? Take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold your nose. And now just gently jogging for 25 paces. Gently jogging for 25 paces. Now we're still going easy enough. I'm not sure if you remember the maximum breathlessness test earlier on, that the goal for an athlete was to achieve 60 paces. That's the minimum. That's the starting point. And really for them to get up to 80 paces. Yeah. So now you're just breathing normally, can't hold for more than 20. That's okay. It's telling you something. And there could be a number of reasons. And I would say definitely don't overdo it, because it could be physiological, but it can be psychological, or it could be both. It's like everything else though. Once you recognize it, then it can be trained. So say, for example, if we had, this won't really increase your breath hold time. It's just one exercise. When you're thinking about changing breathing patterns, just doing one exercise like this is not, well, it helps, but you have to think about your everyday breathing. Can we try now for 25 to 30 paces? So whenever you're ready, take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and hold your nose and jog 25 to 30 paces, jogging, holding your breath. Keep relaxing into the body. Keep going, keep pushing, keep going, keep pushing. You could even go a little bit faster now. So as the air hunger increases, go a little faster, and then to let go, to breathe in through your nose and then bring down everything back towards normal. So now you're likely to feel more alert. The reason being here is because it's like a shot of blood flow to the brain. So the increased carbon dioxide in your lungs and blood will be causing vasodilation, or in other words, increased blood flow to the brain. So we're just going to do it one more time. I don't want to overdo it. Typically, we only do about 5 reps. If we do overdo it, it could bring on a headache. We don't want that. Slightly lightheaded, yeah, the odd time. Amyad, it may be if you have low blood pressure or if you have blood sugar issues. But in general, not necessarily, but in some instances, yeah. So if you're feeling lightheaded, please don't do another one. Just to be on the safe side. Can we go again? Take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold. And again for up to 30 paces. Up to 30, and keep relaxing into the body. Keep going, keep pushing, keep going, keep pushing, keep going, keep pushing. And then when you let go, to breathe in through your nose and then to breathe normally again. And it goes without saying is that your nose is the way to breathe, not your mouth. There's nothing inside your mouth that serves any purpose for breathing. You'll see that anyway in the TED Talk. So the TED Talk will be helpful. It's about 18 minutes. The sound quality isn't good, but that was outside of my control. But yeah. So now it's questions time. So Niamh, if there's any questions, or if you have any questions, you can either unmute yourselves if you're brave enough.
Thank you, Simon.
Hi, Trevor.
Thank you, Simon. I really appreciate that.
No problem. No problem at all.
Everything was really good, apart from I did feel a little bit dizzy after about 30 paces.
Yeah, because it's just, I suppose, if you haven't practiced it before, now I did go easy enough at the start, just to build people up to it. But if you feel a little bit lightheaded, what I would do is just kind of dial it down.
Yeah.
Certainly don't do it now.
Yeah.
But it can depend on people's background. If, for example, somebody does have low blood pressure, like it is a stressor exercise. That's why it has to be done with caution and to listen to the body. Don't listen to me.
And what's the top pace you can go to? About 50 or 60?
Oh God. Oh no, it'll depend on the person. Like the pace itself, like we have athletes sprinting, holding breath, but these guys and girls, they're young, they're fit, they're highly trained individuals. We use the breath to add a load onto their breathing system that would go beyond what physical training can do for them.
Okay.
And also in terms of changing blood gases, lowering oxygen. So this is something that we would use with pulse oximetry, lowering blood oxygen saturation to drop their blood oxygen saturation down into the 80s, which in turn forces the body to make adaptations. But again, it has to be controlled. So today we just went gentle enough to give you a little bit of a taste of it, yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot for your help.
No problem.
Thanks. Bye.
So any other questions? Can a person do it with sleep apnea? If you have sleep apnea, you're better off not doing it. The few that we did today, they won't do you any harm, because they were mild enough. But with obstructive sleep apnea, I always hesitate with doing any breath holding. Breathing training at the same time can be very helpful for sleep apnea. I have a scientific paper, a review paper that I wrote with 2 ear, nose, and throat doctors, and it's called Breathing Re-Education and the Phenotypes of Sleep Apnea. So, I can't really go into it here because that would warrant a class by itself and more. But yeah, if you have sleep apnea, it's really worth looking at your breathing. I'll just say this: never wake up with a dry mouth in the morning, even if you're on CPAP, because mouth breathing results in a low tongue resting posture, and the mandible, your lower jaw, is falling back, and that narrows the airway. So even if you're wearing a CPAP, that's going to be fighting the very thing that you're trying to open, which is the airway. So Yeah, sleep apnea is common with young people, with older people, more common with older people, of course, more common with if we put on a bit of weight. And women then post-menopause, it increases too. And yeah, it's a very common condition. 936 million people on this planet are estimated to have sleep apnea. A lot.
Good afternoon, Patrick. I'm a 57-year-old competitive powerlifter for Great Britain, and
Great. Well done, Karen.
my max squat 125, max deadlift 160, so at 57 kg body weight. So I'm just thinking, how will this help me in regards to when I'm repping out 100 kilo, which I did today, in regards to the breathing?
Yeah, I think it would be good in terms of if you consider that the diaphragm is providing stabilization for the spine.
Yeah.
And if, for example, you have an individual with more upper chest breathing, they may not be generating the same degree of intra-abdominal pressure. So normally with lifting a weight, the person is going to breathe in, they'll hold their breath for a brief period of time just as they're lifting, and then they will be breathing as normal. So in order to brace the weight, so basically when we're taking a breath in, there's a negative pressure in the thorax, and that's what's drawing the air into the lungs. But as the diaphragm is moving downwards, there's a positive pressure in the abdomen.
Yeah.
And that's helping to provide stabilization. So it's almost like the abdomen becomes like a pneumatic balloon. Now, you might be only holding your breath for a very brief period of time just to provide that initial stabilization. It would be worth checking if you're breathing high in the upper chest or
Yeah.
low with good recruitment of the diaphragm. And
Well, I
I would say
wear a
that's
belt, so I just know when I wear the belt, to ensure that I breathe out into the belt. So I
that's
think I
good.
am, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. So nose breathing as well. Nose breathing, you have a good recruitment of the diaphragm typically. Well, at least you have a better one. Mouth breathing is going to be more upper chest. So we would encourage people to try and avoid mouth breathing if possible, just on the basis that mouth breathing does cause more upper chest than nose breathing. So yeah,
Perfect. Thank you.
no problem. Hi, Selena. Salina.
Hi, yeah, Selena. Sorry, I'm driving. I don't want to make you all sick. Um,
What's your bad driving or sorry,
no,
that's only a joke.
no, it's not my fault. It's LA. Um, my question sort of pertains to I do teach breath work. I have read your book. I have followed you for a long time. I am not trained by you yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I do functional. I'm a former pro athlete in a couple sports, so I do a lot of functional movement. One of the sports would be dance, so a lot of training in postural breath and postural movement. My question is, could you say that this is in my assessment and my use for a really long time, the absolute imperative for training all my athletes? But there's also this hyperventilation kind of breathing, which could you say that is it possible to get out of that rumination? You could use something like a hyperventilation style breathing to shift somebody into a state they've never actually known consciously, and then train them with the oxygen advantage for practicality and longevity.
Yeah, totally. So, say, for example, holotropic breathing or conscious connected breathing, which involves a period of hyperventilation. And it can be very good for trauma release. It can be very good for the individual to experience the symptoms of hyperventilation. So if they do experience hyperventilation in their real life, they won't be as kind of terrified of it or fearful of it. So it's definitely a release. And it does allow things to come to the surface to be dealt with easier. So I've heard great things about hyperventilation. So definitely yeah, it works. Where we come in is looking at a person's everyday breathing practice. So if you're talking about rumination, it's looking at how is the individual breathing going into competition? How is the person breathing during competition? How can you prepare them for that? How are they sleeping? Are they waking up with a dry mouth in the morning, for example? And I should kind of, just in case people are wondering, well, is he going to say now I'm going to tape them out? We have our own tape. And the only reason being is because like it's the field that I've been working with. I've been encouraging my own students to wear a support. So I don't necessarily call it a mouth tape. I try and avoid it. It's more nasal breathing support. It's a stretchable cotton tape. It's worn around the mouth. This one's for beards. So it's called myo tape. And you can see there, it's pulling my lips together. So it's safe, because if we were introducing this to young athletes, we can't just get them to close their mouth. And the other thing about this is we need to be able to show people how to decongest the nose. We never want to force nasal breathing, whether it's, you know, a teenager or whether it's an athlete. We have to make sure that, yes, the individual, give them the tools to be able to decongest their nose, improve their nasal breathing, and then adapt to nasal breathing. And that also goes with individuals with obstructive sleep apnea. Even in this room here, out of there's 78 of you now, 50% of you will wake up with a dry mouth in the morning. I will absolutely guarantee you that you're not waking up feeling as refreshed as you could be. If you're waking up with a dry mouth in the morning, it's not good. And the reason being is because open mouth breathing results in a low tongue resting posture. And your mandible, which is your lower jaw, is inevitably going to go back. And this narrows the airway. Now it makes breathing more difficult because you're trying to breathe air through a narrower airway. There's an increased resistance to breathing. And the increased resistance to breathing can increase the risk then of, say, snoring or obstructive sleep apnea or upper airway resistance syndrome in females. So yeah, like if we want to think about mental performance, so rumination of the mind, it starts with sleep. But then you might say, well, what about if I'm waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning? That can be influenced by hyperarousal. So when the autonomic nervous system is in an increased sympathetic drive, and you have a really important game the following day, and you know the pressure is on, and that's going to then put so much pressure on you to fall asleep and to stay asleep. And now you're more likely to wake up in the middle of the night. And it's just ironic, the very time that you need to wake up feeling refreshed so that you can hold your attention on that game, your sleep is impacted because of the nerves of that game. So yeah, so we have strategies then in terms of different audios that people can listen to that are scripted specifically to bring back to sleep, but also in terms of activating the rest and digest response prior to sleep. So I suppose, Selena, answering your question, I like to think of the breathing techniques. They're something that I practice all the time, but I don't always formally practice them. I just make them a part of me. You know, I was like, I've got a personal motive here. I was the individual with the mouth open, breathing hard, breathing shallow, poor sleep, a lot of rumination of the mind. So, you know, it's given me a good experience, and that's why, like, I would always like to impart that to whoever we're working with.
Okay. Well, for some of the athletes, biochemically, neurochemically, when they are experiencing these sleep disruptions, the energy that is preparing them for the fight, so to speak, is really the language today seems to be, I'm having anxiety, I'm having a panic attack. I'm like, no, your body has actually been prepared to now perform. So I create, like a meditation along with breath work stuff that will drop people back into sleep. But the whole mindset around this is a little askew for, at least for the young, in particular, young high-level athletes that I work with.
But it could be, you know, I think with panic disorder, there's going to be two aspects to it. One is you have a physiological aspect of it. The second is cognitive, you know, so the mindset is cognitive, but we also have to ask, like, how is the person reacting to the sensation of air hunger? And can we help to desensitize the reaction to it?
Absolutely.
You know, so yeah, but like breathing does have an inroad into the whole, the physiological aspect of it. The other thing about it is if an athlete is unnerved or if they have nerves going into a competition, their warm-up is an ideal place by bringing breathing training in. See, the thing about breathing, I want it accessible. I don't want somebody to have to do one more thing. You know,
Right.
we're told to do physical exercise, do meditation, and now do breathing exercise. I only do one thing. I do physical exercise every day. While I'm doing it, I'll practice my breathing exercise, and I also do my physical exercise with my attention out of my head. And with all of the athletes coming in, the instructors are saying, listen, you're either going through the motions, you're doing your physical training with your attention stuck in your head. It's a wasted opportunity because your physical training is never just a training for the body. It's a training for your breathing and it's a training for your brain. And getting these kids out of their heads, I think it's one of the best skills that we can give them for the rest of their life. Yes, we may be doing it for the purposes of improving their physical performance and their mental performance now, but these skills will actually carry through. So I think there's a need for it as well. But it's about making it accessible. All too often, breathing is put out there. It's simply not accessible. The language used isn't right. You know, if you have kids in front and really the language that can be used to convey to these youngsters, that can really drive them on.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah.
No problem.
Simplicity. Thank
Oh,
you.
of course. Yeah, I agree. Patrick, hi. And I know Joy is trying to get in as well. So, and I'm not sure, Neve, I haven't been looking at the chats.
Hi, Patrick.
Hi, Patrick.
Hey, just a quick question about the different thresholds of carbon dioxide tolerance as we move up through stages. I'm a biology professor and I'm a former international rower. And I was out rowing this morning, doing some breath work training during my rowing.
Good stuff.
You know, as we get more CO2 tolerant and the CO2 levels rise and we're able to handle more CO2, how long do you think it takes at each of these thresholds for the body to make an adaptation that it isn't at that high CO2 isn't actually causing an increased breathing? Because it's the CO2 that's causing the increased frequency for breathing.
Yeah.
So I'm suspecting that there's dynamic changes in the CO2 receptors and stuff at the breathing centers. In your experience, how long does it take, do you think, at each threshold of tolerance that you can tolerate more CO2? And
yeah, so number one is going to depend. We're never just training CO2. We're also going to be changing the behavior of breathing as well, the rhythm of the breath. So the diaphragm, you know, it's kind of, even though we might be targeting breathing from a biochemical point of view, we're also looking at the other aspects of it. But you could have individuals, like today I was reading a paper, adolescents, they looked at adolescents, kids with anxiety, all had low CO2, every single one of them. You know, so it's a thing that never gets tested. So there can be a number of individuals, especially if they have perfectionist tendencies, that they can chronically have low carbon dioxide. Now, it doesn't always take a drop of carbon dioxide to bring on symptoms. Sorry, it's not that people who hyperventilate, it doesn't mean that they always have chronically low CO2. So there's some gray areas to it. But you could have a group of individuals that their CO2 is starting from a low baseline. Our objective there is just bring everything to normal and high normal. So the human body is very sensitive to the accumulation of carbon dioxide. If CO2 increases by between 2 and 5 millimeters of mercury, it will double ventilation. It's not an easy thing to change. So the risk of overdoing it is very, very marginal. If we look at CO2 in George Dallam's paper, so you'll find his paper online. I did a podcast with him as well because the podcast was looking at cardiovascular health in endurance athletes and whether nasal breathing could mitigate cardiac fibrosing and arrhythmia in endurance athletes. Because with nasal breathing during exercise, there's increased CO2, increased blood flow to the heart, and it could protect heart health. But coming back to that, the individuals at the very start, their carbon dioxide tolerance was in around, if I can remember correctly, was in around 39 millimeters of mercury, which would be normal. And 6 months later, their CO2 measured during intense physical exercise was 44 millimeters of mercury. So it was high normal. But we also have to bear in mind, this was during intense exercise. But they'd still improved their tolerance to it. Now, if you increase somebody's CO2 by 2, 3 millimeters of mercury, that's all we're looking for. But that can be enough to make a big, big difference. So yeah,
Right.
it's never about pushing it beyond the boundaries of normal. Now you might ask then, like, how could you gauge that? This is where we use the breath hold time. So breath hold time, it's not perfect. It's an indirect measure of the chemosensitivity to carbon dioxide. Every time it increases by 5 seconds, it's telling you that something is happening. So every
Right.
time it increases by 5 seconds, our goal would be to get to 25 seconds. Now, if I'm working with elite athletes, it's 40 seconds. But say, for example, your normal individual, 25 seconds will be the goal. And then with elite athletes, it's 40 seconds. With a 40-second breath hold time, there's nothing extreme about that. Like, it's still within the realms of normal, so it is.
Right. Right. Thank you very much.
No problem. I'm just going to go to Joy. I know she was trying to come in there. Joy Taylor.
Hi, I'm so
Hi.
excited. Thank you so much. I love my app. I do it twice,
Oh,
3 times
great.
a
Well
day.
done.
I went
Great.
from a Bolt score of 9 to 20 in 3 months.
Wow, brilliant.
Yeah, I have sleep apnea. I was unable to get your band because it's sold out in the US. So I use my husband's like icing band or something around me just to have something to help. And I also just bought the sports mask. So my
Sure.
question
Yes.
is, can I use the sports mask? How would I use the sports mask with
Yeah.
sleep apnea?
Yeah, you can
Is
use
it
it, but don't use it during sleep. So it's to be worn during the day.
Oh,
There's a couple of things here could be useful. One is it's known that if you improve respiratory muscle strength, that it helps to lower high blood pressure. So it can help with the cardiovascular system. You'll find a number of papers on that. So the sports mask, even though it's designed for sports, you could actually wear it for, say, 10 minutes to 15 minutes if you were watching television, and just put the setting to high. So it's going to add an extra load onto the diaphragm. So you're breathing against resistance. And that could be quite useful for a number of things. One is you've got a biomechanical load, but you also have a biochemical load. What I would start off it off with 5 minutes and see how your body responds to it. And then do it a couple of days like that, and then increase it to 10 minutes and do it a couple of days like that. So if you're on a laptop or watching television, or maybe you're reading a book, it's a slight bit uncomfortable, but it's designed because that's the load. So, when you're doing it, breathe in and out through the nose, with your tongue resting in the roof of the mouth as well. And that will help with breathing practice, which will give benefits in terms of obstructive sleep apnea.
so when you in the app, when I do like 5 minutes or 10 minutes of just close one nostril,
Yes.
I thought I would use this instead, but
Yeah, that's stronger. The
I
mask is
was
stronger.
okay, but on a low setting, maybe. I mean, I think
Yeah, well, there's a little valve in the front of it, so you
yeah.
can move it right over so that you're breathing minimal. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a breathing exercise without you having to pay attention to anything.
Okay.
And
Thank you
do your
so
best to
much.
breathe in and out through the nose as well. Start off gently and then kind of build it up. 15, 20 minutes will be tops every day.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Thank
You're
you
very
so much.
welcome. Thank you, Joy. Kaz, hi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Perfect, yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask about cycling at altitude and training for that. So I'm training at the moment, and although I'm doing quite well holding nasal breathing with jogging and walking, when I'm cycling up a hard climb, I just can't do it. And even when I watch the professionals in the Tour de France, a lot of them are just breathing through their mouths. So I just wondered if you've got any advice on that.
Yeah,
Thank
the
you.
TED Talk actually will be helpful there, because even though we do want nasal breathing, we're typically talking about at a comfortable intensity. So we're talking about zone 2. There is a point at which the intensity of air hunger, the sensation of air hunger gets too high that it's inevitable that you switch to mouth breathing. So it's not that we want nasal breathing at any cost. What we want to do is we want to build up the aerobic base. So whenever you're on the flat, whenever you can sustain nasal breathing, do it with nose breathing. And then there is a point at which you have to push yourself going up a hill. Then you're going to switch to mouth breathing. But then, of course, maybe you're going downhill after that. You switch back to nasal breathing. So it's doing your best. See, a lot of athletes, they'll have their mouth open irrespective. Even during their warm-up, the mouth is open. You know, they walk down the street with their mouths open. So that doesn't make sense. So what we're saying is, yes, nasal breathing is the most important, but there's also a time for mouth breathing.
But does the air hunger, I think from what I've read in your book, it does kind of replicate altitude training, doesn't it? When you're actually depriving yourself of the...
See, altitude training is a bit different because the air is thinner, so it would cause a drop in your blood oxygen saturation. And the other thing about altitude is because the air is thinner, your breathing muscles have to work harder to get that air into the lungs because of the reduction of atmospheric pressure. The breath holds that we do will help to, in order, like it's intermittent hypoxia. So it's exposing you to very brief periods of hypoxia, which can be helpful to condition one that if they are going into altitude. Now, when we're like, we prepare, part of our Oxygen Advantage Advanced is preparation for altitude, but we're talking here at a height of 5,000 meters. You know, there is a way to prepare for that from a number of different points of view. But if you're just talking about going up a hill, no, it's like your hill is at sea level. So I don't know, you know, is it, yeah, but yeah, so I suppose the thing is, it's normal. You're going up a hill. There's greater demand on you, and it's inevitable that you'll switch to mouth breathing for that time, but then go back to nose breathing afterwards.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem. Hi, Sophie.
Hi. So I have a question regarding if you would pick one exercise to do after a hard training, like after when you've been like running for an hour or something like that, what would you pick to recover?
Yeah, I suppose just locate the speed of your heart rate just at the carotid arteries, just at the angle of your jaw, and then do your best to slow down the speed of your exhalation. If you can slow down your breathing, you can bring down your heart rate.
So by the smaller breaths overall.
Not necessarily smaller breaths. You could be taking a softer breath in through your nose, but it's having a slow, relaxed exhalation. Okay. So if you have a slow, relaxed exhalation, you stimulate the heart rate. You stimulate the vagus nerve, which brings down the heart rate. The other thing is, if you've adapted to nasal breathing during exercise, your heart rate will be lower anyway. You'll have a faster heart rate recovery.
Okay, so prolonged exhale and overall slower. Okay, yes. Thank you.
No problem. Niamh, how are we doing? I'm just conscious of time.
Yeah, lots of questions in chat, which are all covered. Lots of questions about the trainings, and it's all pretty much covered. So yeah, the follow-up email will be include the replay and resources from today's session.
Great. And I think as well that 18-minute TED Talk, TEDx talk, it'll kind of just add a little bit more detail that I wasn't able to get through today. So you'll get, there's other points in that as well, which will be beneficial. So thanks very much for staying on. And if you are considering breathing training for your clients, reach out to us with any questions that you might have. Thanks very much, Niamh, and to the next one. So take care. Bye.